This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Tuesday edition of Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN. I am Josh Hennig. Another busy football week to prepare for Eagles-Giants Part 2 in 2020. Also, the Masters is on this weekend. A lot of football to prepare you for all week long. And to talk more about it coming up at 6:20 tonight. Reid Fowler, NFL and PGA analyst for DraftKings. They got a great deal going on with DraftKings this weekend in terms of the Masters and the NFL. So you want to stay tuned to learn more about that coming up when we chat with Reid at 6:20. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. To get in on the conversation, 609-403-0973. In my morning preparations of thinking about the day, and a lot of times, those of us like myself and Bros and Mike Gill, we start thinking about the show the next day, starting the night before, and we start, maybe writing down notes or making mental notes or, just kind of like the brain is kind of gestating, an idea of what's going on. And then out of nowhere, I feel like Brett Favre just kicked me in the face today. So if you happen to see in the quotes at 973ESPN.com or the 973 ESPN mobile app, or you missed them a little bit earlier in the show today with Sports Bash with Mike Gill and Hunter Brody, Brett Favre was on the infamous television show First Take. And he had not a lot, but he had a good amount to say about Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson and the Eagles. And I preface everything we're going to talk about here with Brett Favre with a specific disclaimer. In no way is Brett Favre any more qualified to talk about the Eagles than anybody else who's on television or radio. Because number one, Brett Favre has always fashioned himself as just a guy playing football. He's always tried to portray himself. He's the Wrangler guy, right? The Wrangler jeans guy. And now he's the copper fit guy, right? He's just one of you. He wants to wear his jeans. He wants to drink his beer. He wants to have his fun. He wants to go out fishing. He wants to wear his, his Wranglers and his, his plaid shirts, right? And his hats. So Brett Favre doesn't act think, or believe that he knows more about football than you. But because he is Brett Favre, he gets an opportunity to go on ESPN television and talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. And the whole conversation started. We're starting from the start point because I'm not going to be, we at 97.3 ESPN, I should be all inclusive, are not like some entities who want to take one small quote from Brett Favre and turn it into a totally hyperbolic diatribe, okay? We're not that. So, for context purposes, Brett Favre was asked, is Carson Wentz a franchise quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles? Which I think is a completely fair question to ask. Because, let's be realistic, there's a lot of us who are here in the listenership. You out there listening, me here on the microphone. All of us have asked that question at some point or another over the last few years. This was Brett Favre's answer to that question to start off his conversation on ESPN television roughly about 8 hours from here on now.
I will say this. I think he is very capable. I think he has to stay healthy. I know he has to stay healthy. And the pieces around him, I'm not saying they're good enough or not good enough, but they have to stay healthy and have some consistency. Sometimes I don't even know who he's throwing to. They've just been riddled with injuries, and that in itself is certainly not helped Carson, and he's been injured himself. So play a full season with your guys, and let's see what you're capable of.
So first of all, that wasn't the craziest thing you or I have ever heard about Carson Wentz. Let's be realistic. Second of all, Brett Favre said a couple things that are very, very interesting. Number one, he said that the injuries and the inconsistency in the cast around Carson Wentz is a problem. Now, I think that is something that has been brought up before, but I find it interesting coming from Brett, because Brett is a guy who found a way to win games no matter who was out there catching the balls. Whether it was Antonio Freeman, whether it was Sterling Sharp, whether it was Donald Driver, whether it was later in his career when he got to the Vikings, he was throwing to Sidney Rice, for goodness sake. Like he is a guy who is always patterned himself as a guy who he'll play with anybody. So it's almost like a tiny knock against Wentz that he's saying, he's got a constantly changing cast. It's really hard for him to build that chemistry. But then he brings up another interesting point. He says, I don't even know who Wentz is throwing to some of the time. So Favre is right there telling you that he's not 100% dialed in on the Eagles season, okay? He's not like myself or Mike Gill, Hunter Brody, or the guys at Football at 4, Andrew DeCecco, Jeff Mosher, Adam Cap. He's not like those of us who can sit there and tell you about the depths of the Eagles roster. No, he's telling you as a football NFL fan who has consuming the Eagles like any general football fan would, that he doesn't know who some of the guys Wentz is throwing to. And I think that tells you a lot about his perspective on the team. He is himself in no way an expert. Now, when the conversation circled back to Favre after, the panelists on First Take, for those who maybe don't consume the show, but it's Stephen A. Smith, it's Max Kellerman, a couple of guys who are very heavy on the opinionated side and not on the objective analysis side when it comes to sports. Two guys who are more well known for their hot takes and their objective analysis when it comes to sports. So when they brought the conversation back around the Favre, this is what Brett said about Wentz the second time round.
I think he's very capable. I think we all are in agreement that he has the tools. I'm going to err on the side of lack of consistency. Who are you throwing to? More than anything, they've had to mix and mingle players in and out. Now, that being said, other quarterbacks have managed to handle that very well. So I get the other side of the argument that you got to make it work.
So now Brett's starting to bridge two sides of the same debate. He's giving you the look, it's hard to make a judgment on the guy. He hasn't had the same consistent players around him. There's been injuries. But then he takes his foot and steps in the other side of the fence and says, now, I understand that there are concerns that, there are other quarterbacks who seem to be able to find a way to play with all these new guys, and Wentz seems to have a problem at times. So again, it's a tiny little backhanded shot at Wentz. There's obviously a judgment being made by Brett here that he says, you're the X level of talent. Other quarterbacks in your situation, maybe they're able to find a way where you can't. Now, notice Brett hasn't criticized Wentz for the decision-making. He hasn't criticized Wentz for the turnovers. He hasn't criticized Wentz for any of the deeper football stuff. He's keeping this very straightforward, right? And I think that's important to absorb and take in as we get to the final two audio cuts from Favre's appearance on ESPN's First Take. He's not giving you Brian Balding or Baldy's breakdowns, okay? He's not giving you the czar of the playbook, Emory Hunt, okay? He's not giving you John Clayton, the professor, right? He's not giving you the football scientist, Casey Joyner. He's not giving you NFL insider Adam Kaplan. He's not giving you 20-plus years covering the NFL. I got Doug Peterson on speed dial insider Sal Palantonio. All five people I named are going to give you deeper analysis than Brett Favre is giving you. So again, we take it with a grain of salt. Brett doesn't present himself as a football expert. Brett himself is not giving you heavily deep insights on Carson Wentz. He's given you a very straightforward analysis. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. So then he goes from talking about Wentz, and unprompted, nobody asked him about the next person he mentions. Nobody asks him about 2017 Super Bowl Eagles run. Unprompted, unprovoked, uninitiated, Favre comes out of left field with this. And this is the thing that almost broke the internet today and caused certain people to freak out and lose their minds because they don't have context.
I actually thought that they should have kept Nick Foles rather than Carson Wentz, just based off of production and where they got to. They won a Super Bowl with Foles, and that was a little bit surprising. But they're obviously banking on his upside. How many more years do you let it linger before you stick with him or you cut bait? That's a question they only can answer.
All right. That's a loaded answer right there. That's a loaded 20 seconds. So let's replay it for context purposes. Remember, Brett Favre is not giving you deep insights. He's not doing a baldy breakdown here. He's just giving you his opinion. Let's run it back. Let's break down what Favre said here.
I actually thought that they should have kept Nick Foles rather than Carson Wentz, just based off of production and where they got to.
Now, production and where they got to. Favre is basically leaning on the he won you a Super Bowl argument, which a lot of fans have brought up, okay? Overlooking the fact that when you compare the Wentz years under Doug Peterson to the Foles years under Doug Peterson, it's a night and day situation, okay? He talks about production. Well, Nick Foles has a 6-2 record in the regular season and 4-1 in the postseason under Doug Peterson. That is a total. 5 playoff games, 8 regular season games, 13 total. Carson Wentz has a 35-28-1 record, a much larger sample size. So it seems like Brett is very hyper-focused on that smaller sample size with Foles, and in some ways, whether he is or not, I don't know, almost projecting that out. Here's more from Brett.
They won a Super Bowl with Foles, and that was a little bit surprising, but they're obviously banking on his upside.
They're banking on Wentz's upside. Now, it's been suggested by some people in the internet realm that Favre is parroting information that Doug Peterson has given him because him and Doug are friends. They've hung out in the offseason. They've gone fishing in the past. They're good friends. They're friends on and off the field because Doug was his backup quarterback for a long time. And there's if you go back and watch some of the NFL film stuff with Brett Favre, Doug's in them, right? I'm going to assume that, again, this is Brett's opinion. He doesn't have any special insight. He's not presenting himself as an insider. This is his opinion. He believes the Philadelphia Eagles are banking on Wentz upside. And I think for Brett, he looks around the sport and he realizes that when he played in the 90s, he saw the 49ers trade Joe Montana and bank on Steve Young's upside. In his own experience, when him and the Packers parted ways, even though that whole situation was a complete dumpster fire, Brett Favre believes that they were banking on Aaron Rodgers' upside. The problem in this conversation is that Nick Foles and Carson Wentz are nowhere at the point in their careers that Young and Montana and then later Favre and Rodgers were. So it almost feels like he's trying to project things he's observed in other places onto the Eagles situation, and then the rest of the answer.
You know, how many more years do you let it linger before you stick with him or you cut bait? That's a question they only can answer.
How many more years do you let it linger or do you cut bait? Those are some very strong inferences from Brett Favre. Now, again, as I mentioned 10 minutes ago before I started playing these cuts, Brett Favre doesn't present himself at any point as an expert. He's a guy who played football. He wants to wear his Wrangler jeans. He wants to do his copper fit workout, so he can still throw the football around. And he wants to go play flag or tackle football with the guys at the local park, right? He wants to wear his, hats and, coach the local high school football team. And he wants to hang out and, just chat football, and have a good time and maybe grab a beer while he goes fishing. So he's not presenting himself as an expert. But he brings up some very interesting points. Whether the points are valid or not is a different conversation. But I wanted to give you the full audio with the context of what was really going on in those conversations. 609-403-0973 is the PlaySugarHouse.com text board. We will get to your texts a little bit later this hour, so keep the text coming. We'll get to all of them at 609-403-0973. Reid Fowler of DraftKings coming up to talk about the Masters and the NFL in about 4 minutes from now. I want to let you know that Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN is being brought to you by weightliftinghq.com. Look, folks, you probably heard me talk about being a big fitness enthusiast on the radio. Well, you know that going to the gym, getting a workout, it's a big deal to me. You know I'm passionate about that. Well, when I heard about weightliftinghq.com, what they can do for fellow weightlifting and fitness enthusiasts, I was quite impressed. Weightlifting.com, weightliftinghq.com is a local company right here in South Jersey that operates fully online and caters to weightlifters and fitness enthusiasts interested in working out from home. So here's the deal. Whether you're back at the gym, whether you're trying to do at-home workouts, or whether you want to go to the gym and supplement your workout program from home, weightliftinghq.com has you covered. They got everything from bench and squat racks, kettlebells, dumbbells, cardio and fitness machines, and some pretty awesome accessories like heart rate sensors, fitness watches, resistance cables, and more. You can't beat the local customer service, and they will deliver it and even set it up for you at your home. They have incredibly competitive prices, so check them out online at weightliftinghq.com and use the code RADIO10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. That's RADIO10 at weightliftinghq.com for 10% off your entire order. I'm Josh Hennig. This is Game Night on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea City.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. And we got another busy sports weekend, the Masters, and a busy NFL weekend. Of course, you have the opportunity with DraftKings. They've launched the first ever multi-sport $100,000 free-to-play pool combining the Masters and NFL Sunday. And here to talk more about it is the one and only Reid Fowler here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Reid, how you doing today?
Josh, doing well. Yeah, I'm excited. This new thing that we're doing over at DraftKings, it's like you mentioned, $100,000 prize pool and questions to choose from, like which will be greater, number of Bryson drives over 350 yards or number of QBs with over 350 passing yards on Sunday. So it's very cool to do that. This is, a tradition unlike any other. They're true when they're talking about it, because we get Masters in November, we get it with football, and we get two Masters, Josh, within a span of 6 months. So I'm excited to talk some shop with you.
Well, let's get into something about the Masters, because I know a lot of people, when you look at the odds, when you look at the lines about, who's the favorite, who's not the favorite. But I feel like in 2020, this might be the year where, maybe the favorites really aren't the favorites anymore because of how different everything is. There's going to be no patrons in the stands. There's going to be a totally different environment down there. Everything I've heard and read is telling me that this might be the year to maybe not go straight for the favorites.
Well, yeah, and you take a look at the last 5 years from 2015, the average odds, if you compile all the guys from Tiger all the way to Spieth, is around 30 plus 3,800 plus 3,900, right? That's not to say that that's where you get those guys who are going to win. But when you take a look at, right, like I believe Tiger, I believe Jordan Spieth was the lowest at a plus 1,100 in 2015. And we saw a guy like Danny Willett when the Masters had a cold and rainy environment, it was Danny Willett who won at plus 6,600. Now, when you take a look at Augusta, right, we're going to hear this quite a bit, is that course history is extremely important this week. Guys who know where to hit it, where to miss it, is definitely something that's going to be vastly important, how they play around the greens. And that does matter here. It matters more so here than anywhere else, but I wouldn't say it matters more so than current form. And so I hear what you're saying about the favorites, like the guys like Dustin Johnson, Justin Thomas, and Brooks Koepka to an extent. They've been playing well, over the last week or last month we've seen. And then Bryson clearly is one of the top dogs. So I get what you're saying. There's going to be some guys that we'll talk about in that 30 range that I really like. But I also think that when you look at this type of tournament, man, the top dogs usually win it.
I know Bryson, he's one of these guys. He's got the big, long drive. But is he really the best putter for the Masters to be able to round this out to a win in 2020?
Yeah, so if you just take a look at putting without the bent grass, fast, those type of things splits, he actually ranks third in strokes gained putting over the last 36 rounds. So when people talk about, man, Bryson is hitting it a mile, look at where he's going to hit the ball in number one, like his direction and navigating through a course. When he gets on the surface, on the greens, he's an extremely good putter. But a big thing that he has to do, right, because this is really going to be a test of how to be aggressive, but then turn it off once you get to the greens. The guys who are more defensive putters at Augusta usually do well. So the Ricky Fowlers, although he's one of the best at Augusta National and one of the best putters, he's an aggressive first putter. A guy like Bryson and other guys who have done well, even a Patrick Reid to an extent, Tiger, when he won last year or 2019. These guys were more defensive putters, taking away those three putts and getting pars when they need to get pars and being aggressive on those par fives when they can be. So he's someone that I'm really excited to see how he navigates and how he turns it off, because when you're a guy who's competing in a long drive contest off the tee, you're going to have to dial it down. Your heart rate is going to have to be a little bit slower when you get up into these greens, because it's more about touch than it is about being aggressive when you get on these putting surfaces.
Reid Fowler joining me here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. And follow me Twitter at Reid T. Fowler for all of your PGA and NFL analysis. Don't forget DraftKings, $100,000 to play, the pool for you to win $100,000 combining the Masters and NFL Sunday. You can get in on the action only with DraftKings. Couple of names that stand out to me for this weekend as well, Reid. I'm looking at Xander Schauffele. We know that he played well in last year's Masters. Is he a guy that you're interested in to see what he does now in this iteration?
Yeah, he's always someone that you have to be interested in when it gets to these major tournaments. Like you mentioned, 5th at the U.S. Open, 10th at the PGA. And like you talked about, he was competing last year, right? If it wasn't for Tiger Woods and that storybook ending, could we have seen something like a Xander Schauffele, Brooks Koepka, Dustin Johnson type of playoff? Who knows, right? And we don't want to speculate on that, because Tiger winning was one of the best things that could have happened to all of us as fans, not just in golf, but in sports in general. But yeah, I mean, you talk about it, like his putting has been fantastic over the last 5 tournaments. He's got no worse than, I believe, a 25th place dating back to June 28th at the Travelers Championship. He's got a couple of 25s, top 25s at the BMW and the Northern Trust back in August. But take a look at what he did at the CJ Cup. He was second, right? You see, a good field there. The U.S. Open, He was fifth, another second at a Tour Championship, a no-cut event that I believe he would have won if it was just based on strokes from the beginning and not the extra strokes. And then a 17th at the Zozo Championship. So when you take a look at what Xander is doing, it's hard to say that he doesn't belong up there. The only thing that I would say is that from a betting perspective and value on his number, that's the one part that he's always going to have issues with because he hasn't won at the same clip as these guys up at the top have won at. Like Brooks Koepka at 1,700 is the one guy that I think those guys should be switched, in my opinion. Brooks should be 16, Xander should be 17, and I'd be completely fine with saying Xander is at his number of something that is quote unquote value. But yeah, he's been playing fantastic golf over the last, 6 months.
You mentioned the betting odds. One guy's numbers that stand out to me that's very interesting. Tony Finau is a plus 3,300 to win, but he's a plus 250 for top 10 finish. So is there maybe something where you say, hey, people talk about making parlays, right, on maybe an NFL Sunday, right? Well, what if you said, hey, Tony Finau, I don't know if he's going to win, but that plus 250 might be enough juice for me to create a parlay with Tony Finau for top 10.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk about Finau in placement spots. He is the one guy. When you talk about major tournaments, and whatever that barrier is of him actually winning, he's that player. And like, you're exactly right. If you're parlaying that with, NFL Sunday, and you don't know, right? If you he's really good, and we've seen him as a popular golfer, whether it be DraftKings or just in general. And you don't be like, man, he's got all these top 10 and top 5s. He has to be good. He has to be able to win. So maybe his outright is great. No, he just like that. Those top 5s, top 10s is the spot to go. Tony Finau, the ball striking is great. The putter can get hot and cold. It's leaning a little bit more hot of recent. So yeah, absolutely. At plus 250 to top 10, I think it's a fantastic wager.
Is there anybody else in that top 5, top 10 range that you're looking at and you're saying, I don't think this guy is going to win the tournament, but I feel really good about them finishing in the top 5 or top 10 that people can take a look at with DraftKings?
Yeah, one guy I'm interested in is Cam Smith. Like, his outright is at plus 9,000 right now in the DraftKings Sportsbook. His top 10 is at plus 550. Look, this is it's a 93-man field. It's top 50 and ties to make the cut. And so for DraftKings specifically, you're going to need your 6 of 6 from the get-go to get through if you want a chance to win the Millie Maker. But if you're looking at from the betting market specifically, these top 5, top 10s, you want to potentially look at guys that are further down the list that, because it's a major, their numbers are inflated. And Cam Smith is one player I'm taking a really good look at, because when you look at what he's been able to do of recent, he's been great. Like, when you talk about putting him up against some of these other players up at the very top, he's one guy that's striking the ball, fantastic over his last handful of tournaments. He's got a 24th at the Shriners, 11th at the CJ Cup, and a 4th at the Zozo Championship. So progressively getting better. He hasn't lost strokes with his irons since the WGC St. Jude back in August. So we know the irons are there, and he's just a great putter. He's a great putter. He plays around the greens very well. So Cam Smith is one guy I'm looking at both from an outright perspective and also bringing that back in insurance a little bit. Top 5, I believe, at plus 1,200, and then top 10. If you're not as bullish as I am on Cam Smith, then plus 550 for his top 10.
For your full list of Masters predictions, preview, and more, go jump on Reid Fowler at Twitter at Reid T. Fowler. He's got posted his Masters tournament predictions and preview right now. That's Reid T. Fowler on Twitter. Now, Reid, before I let you go, we know that according to a DraftKings study of over 1,000 fans who love both football and golf, they found 77% are interested in engaging in multi-sport gaming. So is there an NFL game or two that maybe someone says, I want to get in on these early week Masters odds, but I want to parlay that with some of the early week NFL odds?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at the top, I never advise to do this because it's so hard to pick a golfer to win the tournament. And so, like, if your golfer wins the tournament and then your NFL bet doesn't, because those are extremely variant. But it's extremely fun, like you mentioned, Josh. It's extremely fun, to have football on Sunday and golf. So this time I might look at, and please bet responsibly. I might look at this a little bit closer. like if you want to go after the favorites, like a John Rahm or a Brooks Koepka at the very top, right? Brooks at plus 1,700, John Rahm right now at plus 1,050 on the DK Sportsbook, and parlay that with Seahawks plus 2 at the Rams. I can't think of a reason or other than like just recency bias that the Seahawks are underdogs to the Rams. Like the Rams are 1-2 in their last 3, and they lost to the 49ers and Dolphins. And maybe the Dolphins are a better team than we thought. But now you're looking at the Seahawks, coming off of that bad loss, 44 points to the Bills, being an underdog and getting 2 against the Rams. I know they're coming off their bye, but the Seahawks have historically been great ATS coming up after a loss. They're 1-0 this season after a loss ATS with a margin of victory of I believe 10 points. So I'm confident, Pete Carroll, we might get Chris Carson back, which I believe changes the dynamic of this game. So give me Seahawks plus 2 and parlay that with one of these top guys like Dustin Johnson, JT, or Brooks Koepka as the favorites if you don't like their outright number because it's a little too short.
He's Reid Fowler. Follow him on Twitter for more of your NFL and PGA analysis. Reid T. Fowler. And don't forget about the DraftKings $100,000 pool. It's free to play, combining the Masters and the NFL Sunday only with DraftKings. As all guests, Reid appeared on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Reid, always appreciate the time.
All right, Josh. Thanks.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night. Game Night being brought to you by GMS Law. Make the right call with 4 convenient locations to serve you. Visit them online at gmslaw.com. The text board is open. We got a bunch of texts to get to. We'll get to all of them next. 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation. Your thoughts, what Brett Favre had to say, the Eagles, and more. I got a lot of interesting perspectives there on the text board. I want to get to all of you, and I want to give you full time coming up next here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
But I know Doug, of course, we were together for a long time. He's a very simple coach. He's going to put you in the best possible opportunity to succeed. He's not going to complicate things. So I know it's not Doug. So I'm going to write it off as too many injuries right now. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt.
That was Brett Favre, the final point he made about who's really at fault for the Eagles season. What's going on with the Eagles season, right? So that was Brett Favre. First take. We'll get to all your texts coming up in a moment. 609-403-0973. Of course, Game Night being brought to you by Matt Black Kia. Matt Black Kia wants to get you approved today. Matt Black Kia in the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township. 609-403-0973. ThePlaySugarHouse.com. Text board 609-403-0973. Get to your text in the order they came in. Joey D. and Ventnor chimed in first and said, why would the Eagles hire Press Taylor for Carson Wentz can just ignore who someone is the same aged friend / buddy? That is the regression right there for Carson Wentz and the Eagles. That's Joey D. and Ventnor. Well, Joey D., first of all, it's not as simple as that. So Press Taylor originally joined the Eagles coaching staff during the Chip Kelly era. He was a offensive quality control coach, basically a low-level coach, does a little bit of everything, basically whatever the team needs. When Doug Peterson came along, he was still an offensive quality control coach, but he was also given the added title of assistant quarterbacks coach. Basically, whatever John DeFilippo needed, he did it. So he was kind of being groomed already when Doug Peterson came in to be the next quarterback coach, because the idea is that DeFilippo at some point was going to leave. The assumption all along was that DeFilippo at some point was going to leave for another job. So when he did eventually leave to become the offensive coordinator in Jacksonville, and now he's working in Chicago, as we know, Press Taylor was the in-house promoted individual. So it's just like any job where, someone is groomed for a job. Maybe they're the understudy. Maybe they're the number 2 at a job. And then somebody moves on. They get promoted to be the number 1 in that position. So That's the reason why the Eagles hired him. It's not that Taylor, the Eagles were ignoring something or they overlooked something with Press Taylor. The organization felt, and it's, whether it's fair or not, obviously the proof in the pudding is that he's probably not the right guy to be coaching Carson Wentz at this point because of the way things have gone. But that's why he's here. They didn't, foresee this happening, okay? And Joey D, it's a great question. I'm glad you asked because it's an opportunity for everyone to understand a little bit more of Press Taylor. Now, his current position, he's not just the quarterback's coach, he's the passing game coordinator. Now, I have no idea what that name really entails, considering that, they hired a bunch of different offensive coaches this offseason. They have Marty Morningweg. He's an offensive senior advisor. They have Rich Scangarello. He's an offensive coaching assistant. They got all these different guys in there now with Doug Peterson, and nobody really knows whose job is what. It's all kind of, ambiguous. So, but I do think, Joey D, there's something to be said for the fact that when Carson Wentz had good, hard coaching, that Carson Wentz played a lot better than he has with Press Taylor as his primary primary quarterback coach / offensive passing game coordinator. That's a mouthful. Why don't we just say that Press Taylor works for the Eagles and get it over with? 609-403-0973. Jeremy in Delaware chimes in. Jeremy says, I think the Eagles are scared to give Jalen Hurts a shot. If Hurts has an awesome game, Carson will get butthurt. Eagles don't want to hurt Wentz's feelings, so they're just riding with him. When is enough enough? Well, Jeremy, a couple things. First of all, I think that you're making a little bit of a leap when you say the Eagles are scared to give Hurts a shot. Remember, there was no traditional offseason, so Hurts didn't have what, as Doug Peterson calls, the grass time to work with the offense, to learn the offense hands-on in the offseason. Because in the traditional offseason, the rookies show up in May, and then they have the mini camps leading into June, and then they take the part of the summer off, and they return in August. Well, they had none of that work in May and June this year. So he's already behind what a normal rookie quarterback would be, and we know rookie quarterbacks always have trouble initially in the NFL. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's got it all figured out on day one. Even Peyton Manning led the NFL in interceptions his rookie season. So I don't think they're scared to give Hurts a shot. I think they genuinely don't think he's 100% ready. And I think that when I look at Carson Wentz, there's something to be said for the fact that they invested a lot in this guy, $100 million, and to an extent, you could argue they're looking for a return on their investment, as some have said. So I think that part of it has less to do with Hurts than it has to do with the fact that the Eagles have already committed a lot of resources in terms of draft picks and trades and money into Wentz. So they're kind of sinking or swimming with him. So I think you need to morph your perspective from one area to realizing that the organization drafted this guy for a reason. Doug Peterson's playing this guy for a reason. He's here for a reason. And remember, you can't just get rid of him willy-nilly. He's got a lot of money on that contract. So for better or worse, you're kind of stuck with him no matter how many bad decisions he makes, no matter how many stupid interceptions he throws or how many ill-advised throws he makes, no matter how many bizarre plays and how many times he lets his ego get in the way. The Eagles are going to sink or swim with him this year because then after this year, that's when they can start saying, all right, what do we really have? What are we really dealing with? 609-403-0973, theplaysugarhouse.com text board. Dan from EHT chimes in, says, Wentz is going through growing pains. Remember, Russell Wilson had a 2-year span of fumbling. Wentz is the total package of talent and intangibles that doesn't grow on trees like we've seen. The Bears haven't had a good quarterback since Jim McMahon. That's Dan and EHT chiming in. A couple things, Dan. One, I don't know if Wentz is going through growing pains. I have trouble believing that a guy in his 5th year in the NFL is going through growing pains. I think that it's less about growing pains than it is about Wentz is not growing as a human being. Period. It's not growing pains. It's a lack of growth. It's a lack of development. It's a lack of progression when it comes to him as a professional football player. Yes, he has talent and intangibles, but talent and intangibles only get you so far in life. Remember, hard work beats talent every time talent doesn't work hard. And I think Wentz thinks at times that his talent and his intangibles are going to overcome and get him somewhere where it's not right now. I think that he thinks at times he's more talented than he really is, Danny HT. And you're right. Yes, the Bears haven't had a good quarterback in forever, right? And there's a plenty of teams that have had a dearth of quarterbacks for years and years and decades on end. You know, Matthew Stafford is the best quarterback in Lions history in probably 40 years, right? But the Lions haven't put the best talent around him for him to be successful. And Matthew Stafford makes some pretty bizarre decisions at times. Phillip Rivers was arguably the best quarterback in Chargers history since Dan Fouts. But yet Phillip Rivers, numerous times, his teams would choke late in games. And that's why they would lose when they were in San Diego, then later Los Angeles. Carson Wentz's situation is very different than those guys. Carson Wentz has put himself in those bad positions multiple times. So the reason why we have to criticize him, as you have mentioned yourself, Danny HT, about the interceptions, the turnovers, and the fumbles, there's something to be said for the fact that Wentz is doing this to himself, and he has to take responsibility for those actions. And that's why Brett Favre is saying, look, he's capable of doing it. Brett Favre recognizes talent too. Brett Favre was not going after Wentz aggressively because of the fact that he understands that he has talent and he has intangibles. 609-403-0973. Dan for Tuckerton chimes in and says, I see nothing wrong with what Favre said. First, he said, injuries to Wentz's weapons hinder the ability to fully evaluate him. Go a season healthy and you'll be able to. Number two, he understands the other side of the debate where other quarterbacks have success when wide receivers get hurt. Third point, he is far from the only person to think they should keep Foles. While the ceiling might be higher for Wentz, how long do you realize the glass ceiling? Dan for Tuckerton says, lastly, his entire take comes off and is similar to others frustrated fans of the Eagles. It's not far-fetched that he is a fan of the Eagles since his ex-teammate is the coach and is speaking as a fan. Well, it's kind of what I was saying all along, Dan Tuckerton. I was saying that Favre isn't fashioning himself as an expert or an insider or a specialist or anything. He was just giving his perspective as a football fan. I think you're 100% right saying that. I think that's what I was saying from the beginning of when I was playing the audio cuts. And it's not that anything that Favre said is wrong. It's that people are going to take anything and extrapolate it. And, you know, when he goes and makes the comment about Foles, it's an opportunity for a segment of the fandom who are either members of the cult of Nick Foles or who are a segment of the Eagles fan base that is just so frustrated they don't know what to do anymore, what to think anymore, and it gives them fuel for the fire. Whether it should be or not is unfair. It's not Favre's fault that he's, you know, instigating a segment of the fandom that is a little bit, crazed and he's got a couple screws loose in the head. But listen, you're right. He is a fan. He's a football fan. He loves football. Doug Peterson's his buddy, and he probably watches maybe a little more Eagles than other people would, who are not, traditional Eagle fans. So it's not that anything Favre said was wrong. It's that when he says stuff like, well, other quarterbacks have had success when their wide receivers get hurt, or when he says stuff like, maybe the Eagles should have kept Foles, or when he says, how long do you hang on to Wentz until you cut bait? When he says all of those kinds of things, it seems to instigate a segment of the population. And last but not least, you have texters like Mike in North Wildwood. Take off your rose-colored glasses and get real. This Eagles team is a joke. Thanks. Thanks, Mike in North Wildwood. You're really contributing to the show with about 200 emojis, and I don't even know what the half of everything you said on these texts. But guess what? Mike in North Wildwood, try again tomorrow. Josh Hennig, Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. We'll We'll be back tomorrow for a Weinberg Wednesday with Dave Weinberg. We'll ask him more about the Eagles as they get ready for the next game against the Giants this Sunday. Have a great night, everybody.